What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down for what should be a routine morning show interview, only to face a host who seems determined to tear him down? In just 38 seconds of pure television chaos, Lara Spencer managed to destroy her own reputation while revealing the ugly side of morning television that viewers rarely see. Before we dive into this incredible moment that had everyone talking, make sure you subscribe and let me know in the comments what you think about what really went down that morning. This is one of those moments that shows you exactly who people really are when the cameras are rolling. So picture this. It's a Tuesday morning, and Denzel Washington, the two-time Academy Award winner, walks onto the Good Morning America set. He's there to talk about his latest film, a powerful drama about redemption and second chances. The man has been in Hollywood for over 4 decades, respected by everyone from directors to fellow actors. This should have been easy. This should have been friendly. But from the moment Denzel sat down in that bright yellow chair, something felt off. The other hosts, Robin Roberts and George Stephanopoulos, seemed perfectly normal, welcoming even. They greeted Denzel with genuine smiles and asked about his family. Robin asked about his wife Pauletta and how they've managed to stay married for so long in Hollywood. Denzel gave his usual thoughtful answer about commitment and respect. George asked about his preparation for the role, and Denzel started explaining his process. He talked about spending time with real people who had similar experiences to his character. He mentioned visiting community centers and talking to folks who had overcome real struggles. His voice had that familiar warmth, that genuine care that makes Denzel so beloved. But then Lara Spencer jumped in. Now, let me paint you a picture of what was happening here. Lara Spencer had been the lifestyle anchor on Good Morning America for years. She had a reputation for being a bit sharp-tongued, but usually she saved that for celebrity gossip segments or fashion critiques. Nobody expected what came next. Lara looked at Denzel with this smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and said, "You know, Denzel, I have to ask, don't you think you're getting a little old for these intense dramatic roles? I mean, you're, what, 70 now?" The studio went quiet. Not just quiet, dead silent. You could see Robin Roberts' face change immediately. Her eyebrows went up, and she glanced at George, who was clearly caught off guard. The camera operators probably didn't know where to point their cameras. But Denzel just sat there for a moment, processing what had just happened. His expression didn't change much. But if you know Denzel Washington, you know that stillness. That's not a good sign. He leaned back slightly in his chair and said very calmly, "Well, Lara, I'm 68, and I'm curious what age has to do with telling stories that matter." You would think that would be the end of it. A reasonable response to an unnecessary comment. But Lara Spencer wasn't done. She laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was that fake television laugh that everyone recognizes. Then she said, "Oh, come on, don't be so sensitive. I'm just saying, maybe it's time to think about doing some lighter roles. You know, comedies, something more appropriate for where you are in life." The temperature in that studio had to have dropped 10 degrees. Robin Roberts was visibly uncomfortable now, shifting in her seat and looking like she wanted to crawl under the desk. George was staring at his notes like they contained the secrets of the universe. Denzel sat forward in his chair. His voice was still calm, but there was something underneath it now. Something that anyone who had ever seen him play a tough character would recognize. "Appropriate," he repeated slowly. "That's an interesting word choice, Lara. Tell me, what makes a story appropriate or inappropriate for someone my age?" Lara seemed to realize she had stepped in something, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. And this is where things went from uncomfortable to absolutely explosive. "Well," she said, still wearing that fake smile, "I just think audiences want to see you in roles that match your energy level. You know, something less physically demanding, maybe a grandfather figure or something sweet and simple." The silence that followed was deafening. Robin Roberts actually put her hand over her mouth. George Stephanopoulos looked like he was witnessing a car accident in slow motion. But Denzel Washington, this man who had commanded respect in Hollywood for decades, who had played everyone from Malcolm X to a corrupt cop to an airline pilot battling addiction, just looked at Lara Spencer with complete calm. And then he said something that nobody in that studio will ever forget. "You know what, Lara? I think I understand now. You're not really interested in my work or my process or why I choose the roles I choose. You're interested in putting me in a box that makes you comfortable. A nice, safe, quiet box where the older black actor knows his place and doesn't challenge anybody or make anyone think too hard." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Robin Roberts' eyes went wide. George looked like he wanted to disappear. The camera operators were probably getting the shots of their careers because this was television gold and television disaster all at the same time. Lara Spencer's face went through about 5 different expressions in 3 seconds. First confusion, then realization, then something that looked like panic. "That's not what I meant at all," she said quickly. "I would never, I don't see color when I..." And that's when Denzel held up his hand. Not aggressively, not rudely, just a simple gesture that said, "Stop talking." "Don't," he said quietly. "Just don't. We both know exactly what you meant. And we both know that if Tom Hanks or Robert De Niro were sitting in this chair, you wouldn't be suggesting they take on grandfather roles and dial back their energy." Robin Roberts looked like she was about to jump in and try to save the interview, but George caught her eye and shook his head slightly. They both knew this had gone too far to fix. Lara Spencer's face was now completely red. You could see her trying to figure out how to get out of the hole she had dug for herself. But instead of stopping, she kept digging deeper. "Look, Denzel, I think you're misunderstanding me," she said, her voice getting higher and more defensive. "I'm just trying to have an honest conversation about career transitions. It happens to everyone in Hollywood." Denzel tilted his head slightly, the way he does in movies right before his character delivers a line that cuts straight to the truth. "Honest conversation," he repeated. "Okay, let's have an honest conversation then. When was the last time you suggested to Meryl Streep that she should stick to grandmother roles? When did you tell Robert Redford he was too old for dramatic parts?" "I'll wait." The silence stretched on forever. Lara's mouth opened and closed like she was trying to find words that just weren't there. Meanwhile, you could see the producers in the background starting to panic. Someone was probably screaming in the control room about going to commercial. But this train wreck was happening too fast to stop. Robin Roberts finally tried to jump in. Bless her heart, she really tried. "You know what? Why don't we talk about the actual film?" Robin said with the kind of bright, desperate energy that television hosts use when they're trying to save a sinking ship. "Denzel, tell us about working with the director on this project." But Lara Spencer, for reasons that nobody will ever understand, chose that exact moment to make everything 10 times worse. "Actually, Robin, I think we should finish this conversation," Lara said, turning back to Denzel with renewed confidence that was completely misplaced. "Denzel, I've interviewed hundreds of actors over the years, and I think I know a thing or two about how this industry works. The fact is, there are certain realities about aging in Hollywood that we all have to face." George Stephanopoulos looked like he was watching the Titanic hit the iceberg in real time. He started to say something, but Denzel raised his hand again. "No, George. Let her finish," Denzel said, his voice deadly calm. "I want to hear what other realities Lara thinks I need to face." And that's when Lara Spencer said the thing that ended her credibility forever. "Well, if I'm being completely honest," she said, leaning forward like she was sharing some great wisdom, "I think part of the problem is that you've always been very serious, very intense. Maybe that worked when you were younger, but now? People want to see you smile more, be more approachable, more likable." The words hit the studio like a physical force. Robin Roberts actually gasped out loud. George put his head in his hands. And somewhere in America, millions of people watching at home probably threw their coffee mugs at their televisions. But Denzel Washington, this master of his craft, this man who had earned every single accolade Hollywood could give, just sat there and smiled. Not a happy smile, not a friendly smile, the kind of smile that should have made Lara Spencer run for the nearest exit. "More likable," he said slowly, like he was tasting each word. "That's fascinating, Lara. Tell me, what exactly makes me not likable? Is it the way I prepare for my roles? The way I treat people on set? The way I've mentored young actors for decades? Or is it something else entirely?" Lara was trapped now, and she knew it. But instead of admitting she had made a mistake, instead of apologizing like any reasonable person would do, she made the fatal error of trying to explain herself. "I didn't say you weren't likable," she backtracked frantically. "I just meant that your image is very serious, well, you have to admit, you can be quite intimidating." "Intimidating," Denzel repeated. His voice was so quiet now that everyone in the studio had to lean in to hear him. "To who exactly am I intimidating?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Robin Roberts looked like she wanted to crawl under the desk and hide until this nightmare was over. George was frantically scribbling notes, probably trying to figure out how to transition to literally anything else. But Lara Spencer, either brave or foolish beyond belief, decided to answer. "Well, I mean, you have this way of looking at people," she said, gesturing vaguely at Denzel's face. "Like you're judging them. Like you think you're better than everyone else." The studio went so quiet, you could hear the air conditioning humming. The camera operators were probably getting shots they would never forget. This was television history happening in real time. Denzel leaned back in his chair and studied Lara Spencer for what felt like an eternity. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured and precise, like a surgeon making the most delicate cut. "So let me make sure I understand this correctly," he said. "According to you, I'm too old for dramatic roles. I need to be more likable. I'm intimidating, and I think I'm better than everyone else. Did I miss anything? Or is that a complete summary of your professional assessment of my 40-year career?" Lara's face went through another series of expressions. She was clearly realizing that she had walked into a trap of her own making, but it was too late to back out now. "I never said any of that," she protested weakly. "You're twisting my words." And that's when Denzel Washington delivered the line that probably ended Lara Spencer's career. "No, Lara, I'm not twisting anything. I'm just repeating exactly what you said, word for word. And now I'm wondering if this is how you talk to all your guests, or if there's something special about me that brings out this particular side of you." The implication was crystal clear to everyone in that studio and everyone watching at home. Robin Roberts looked mortified. George looked like he was having an out-of-body experience. The producers were probably having heart attacks in the control room. But Lara Spencer, incredibly, still wasn't done making terrible decisions. "You know what, Denzel?" she said, her voice getting shrill now. "Maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe the problem is that you can't handle a little constructive criticism. Maybe you're not as perfect as everyone thinks you are." The moment those words left her mouth, you could feel the entire television industry shift on its axis. This wasn't just an uncomfortable interview anymore. This was career suicide happening live on national television. Denzel stood up slowly, smoothing down his jacket with the kind of controlled precision that made it clear he was fighting to keep his composure. When he looked at Lara Spencer, it was with the kind of disappointment that cuts deeper than anger. "You know what, Lara?" he said quietly. "You're absolutely right. I'm not perfect, but I've spent 4 decades trying to be the best actor I can be, trying to tell stories that matter, trying to lift up other people in this industry. And I've never, not once, sat across from someone and tried to tear them down on national television just because I could." The words hit Lara Spencer like a physical blow. Her face went from red to completely pale in about 2 seconds. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For the first time since this disaster started, she seemed to realize exactly what she had done. But Denzel wasn't finished. He remained standing, looking down at her with the kind of quiet dignity that reminded everyone watching why he was one of the most respected men in Hollywood. "You want to know what's really sad about this, Lara?" he continued, his voice never rising above conversational level. "I came here today excited to talk about a film that deals with redemption, with people getting second chances, with the power of human dignity. Instead, I'm sitting here listening to you tell me I'm too old, too intimidating, too serious, and not likable enough for your audience." Robin Roberts looked like she was about to cry. She kept glancing between Denzel and Lara like she was watching a car accident that she couldn't stop. George Stephanopoulos had given up all pretense of trying to control the situation and was just staring at his notes. Lara finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Denzel, please. I think there's been a misunderstanding here." Denzel shook his head slowly. "No, Lara, there hasn't been any misunderstanding. This has been very clear from the beginning. You decided before I even sat down what kind of interview this was going to be. You decided what narrative you wanted to push. And when I didn't play along, you got frustrated and showed everyone exactly who you really are." He started to unclip his microphone, moving with deliberate, controlled motions. The sound technician looked terrified, like he didn't know whether to help or hide. "Wait," Lara said, panic creeping into her voice. "We still have 10 minutes left in the segment. We can start over. We can talk about the movie." Denzel paused, microphone halfway off his jacket, and looked at her with something that might have been pity. "Start over?" he repeated. "Lara, you just spent the last 15 minutes trying to put me in my place on national television. You told me I was too old for my job, that I needed to be more likable, that I was intimidating people. You questioned my professionalism, my choices, and my character. And now you want to start over and talk about my movie like none of that happened?" The silence in the studio was deafening. You could practically hear the careers ending in real time. Robin Roberts finally found her voice, though it cracked when she spoke. "Denzel, please," she said softly. This This doesn't represent who we are here." Denzel turned to Robin with genuine kindness in his eyes. His whole demeanor softened when he looked at her and George. "Robin, George, you two have always been nothing but professional and respectful to me," he said warmly. "This isn't about you. This is about someone who decided to use her platform to try to humiliate a guest for reasons I'll probably never understand." He finished removing his microphone and handed it to the sound technician with a polite nod. Lara Spencer made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Denzel, I'm sorry if I offended you," she said, but even her apology sounded hollow and rehearsed. "That wasn't my intention at all." Denzel stopped walking and turned back to face her one final time. "If you offended me," he said, raising his eyebrows. "Lara, let me be very clear about something. You didn't offend me. You revealed yourself. And the sad part is, I don't think you even understand what you've done here today." He looked directly into the camera, speaking to the millions of people watching at home. "To everyone watching, I want you to know that this doesn't represent the Good Morning America that I've come to respect over the years. Robin and George are consummate professionals. But what happened here today is exactly why we need to have honest conversations about respect, about dignity, and about how we treat each other, especially when the cameras are rolling." With that, he turned and walked toward the exit. No dramatic gestures, no door slamming, no theatrical storming off. Just a man who had reached his limit and chose to leave with his dignity intact. As he reached the edge of the set, you could hear Lara Spencer's voice, desperate and shaky, trying to fill the dead air. "Well, that was unexpected," she said with a forced laugh that fooled absolutely nobody. "When we come back, we'll have cooking tips for your holiday entertaining." But Denzel Washington was already gone. He had walked off the Good Morning America set, leaving behind a trail of destroyed credibility and a lesson that would be talked about for years to come. Robin Roberts sat in stunned silence, her professional composure finally cracking. George Stephanopoulos shuffled his papers nervously, clearly trying to figure out how to transition to literally anything else. And Lara Spencer sat there, surrounded by the wreckage of what had started as a routine interview and ended as a masterclass in how not to treat your guests. The cameras kept rolling for another few seconds before someone finally had the sense to cut to commercial. But the damage was done. In the span of less than 20 minutes, Lara Spencer had managed to insult, belittle, and disrespect one of Hollywood's most beloved figures. And he had responded with the kind of grace and dignity that reminded everyone why he had earned his place in entertainment history. The most remarkable thing about the entire encounter wasn't the confrontation itself, but how Denzel handled it. He never raised his voice, never got personal, never stooped to her level. He simply stated facts, called out behavior, and maintained his composure, even when faced with the kind of disrespect that would have sent most people into a rage. When Denzel Washington walked off that set, he didn't just leave behind a failed interview. He left behind a perfect example of how to maintain your dignity in the face of someone who clearly had none. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching exactly why respect isn't given freely. It's earned through decades of consistent character and professionalism. That 38 seconds of chaos that started it all had turned into 20 minutes of television that nobody who watched it would ever forget.